Hey, what's up? This your boy Norris. Welcome back to another Sew Along. Today we'll be working on my latest pattern design. And as always, I did this in collaboration with my wife, Mimi G Style, and also Simplicity Patterns 9554. Now, the cool thing about this pattern is the drop shoulder. The drop shoulder is super drop that it gives you the illusion that you have short sleeves, but you don't. So you don't have to worry about attaching sleeves to this, and you get a nice casual, comfortable shirt. Now, if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, please click the sewing basics video in the link below. If you need further instructions from that, because this is not a learn to sew video, I would encourage you to sign up to sewitacademy.com, where you have access to the first 5 courses if you sign up for the free trial, okay? Now, once you get all your things together, let's get started. Okay, once again, like I said, we're working on pattern 9554. And this is a button-up shirt with a super drop shoulder. Now, the drop shoulder gives you the illusion that we have sleeves, but we don't, which is one of the dope details that I love about this pattern. And it has a raw, unfinished hem with a facing up under it to give it weight on that hem because it is not finished. And last but not least, it comes in 2 different lengths. My wife is wearing a longer length to give you more of a shirt dress kind of look, or you can use the shorter version like mine, or you can make it even shorter if you wanted to. All right, so on the back you have a few different suggestions for fabric. You can use a chambray, cotton blends, linens, lightweight, denim. You have so many options when it comes to this this particular shirt, as long as it's not a knit. Usually, I mean, anything else probably will work, depending on the weight of it, okay? Also, you want to double check the finished garment. Now, this shirt is not recommended to be fitted. Now, it's supposed to have a oversized, boxy kind of fit to drape off your body. So when you look at the finished garments, don't try to get something that's going to really be almost close to your measurements. You want the extra ease in this particular look, okay? So once you figure out what size you want to cut out, let's go through all the pattern pieces. Okay, first we have pattern piece number 1. Now this is your front piece. You want to cut 2 of this out of your fabric. And right here you have a fold line. This very first fold line right there, I would recommend that you do a strip of interfacing. Now I know it don't say it, but it gives you a little bit more stability for your placket when we get into the construction, okay? I personally won't be doing this because I have pretty much like a sheer kind of fabric, and I don't want to see the interfacing in between the fabric, so mine's gonna be super, super casual. But if you're doing it all traditional, like a shirting or something like a cotton, I would recommend you do a strip of interfacing right here, where that first fold line is, okay? Next we have pattern piece number 3, which is the back. Now you want to cut one of these on the fold, and your fold line is right here, okay? And don't forget to mark your pleats markings right here too. We have pattern piece number 5, and this is the back yoke. Now the back yoke, it has the grain line right here, so you would have to turn it like this, so it will be cut on the bias. But depending on what kind of fabric you're using, if you have vertical stripes and you want to do horizontal stripes for the placket, you can just cut it like this. It really won't matter as much, so feel free to switch it up a little bit if you don't want to cut it on the bias. And you will be cutting 2 of these out of fabric. Next we have pattern piece number 2. Now it's optional. You can cut 2 of these out of fabric, you can cut 1 of these, or you don't have to cut any of these. If you want pockets, you can use it. If not, you don't need it. I think I only cut 1 because I just want 1 on the left side. And as you can see, this right here is cut on the bias, but cutting it on the bias is optional. You don't have to do that because it is just a pocket, okay? Pattern piece number 7. Now this is your collar. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric and 1 of these out of interfacing. Now I'm just going to tell you this. I will not be cutting this out of interfacing because I'm using a sheer type of fabric, and I don't want to see my interfacing in between the two fabrics. Now, again, I will be saying this throughout this sew along. If you're using traditional shirting or cotton or linen or whatever you would traditionally make a button-up shirt outside of what I'm doing, you need to cut the interfacing, okay? Pattern piece number 6, this is the collar band. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric and 1 out of interfacing. Again, I would not be using interfacing. You should use interfacing if you're using a traditional button-up shirt fabric. Pattern piece number 8. Now this right here is the armhole facing. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric. And as you can see, this is cut on the bias. You need to cut this on the bias because it does go around the armhole, okay? Next is pattern piece number 4. This is the tab that goes on the back. All right, last but not least, this is pattern piece number 9. It says cut 1, but you don't need to cut any thing out of this. It's just a guide. When we get to the end, I'm going to show you how to place it on there and mark all of your buttonhole guides. Okay, once you cut all of your pattern pieces out of fabric, we can begin sewing. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is grab your back piece. Now this is the back piece and the right side is facing up. Now there's a pleat in the center and you have two notches or 2 markings. You should see the lines on your back piece. And what you want to do is you want to take the outside line. I end up doing 2 notches. So if you look close, I have a notch here and then I have one here. So the outside one, I'm going to turn it underneath and match it with that notch. And I'm just going to pin just to keep it in place. And then the same thing on the other side. I'm going to take the outside marking and then go underneath and match it up with the other one, and that's going to create a pleat. It might be a little tricky to see it, but my pleat is forming right here. So just head to the machine and you just want to baste that down. Just to let you know, a little tip, I like to go 1/8 of an inch in when I baste instead of doing the seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to base it at 1/2 inch. That way, when we do the regular seam, you won't see the basting sticking out at all. And then you don't have to remove it, okay? Okay, so now that we have our pleat based down, we're going to take our tab. First, I have it wrong sides faced up. And I'm going to turn in to the center on one side, and then the other side turn it into the center and give it a press. And then once I press that down, I'm going to take it all and fold it in half like this. Okay, so once you get it like this, we're just basically going to stitch on this edge right here and then stitch on at the edge. All right, so do all of that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm back for the machine in the pressing station. You can see that I have the tab ready. So what we're going to do is we're just basically going to turn it up like this and making sure that both of the ends touch the side of that pleat, just like that. And I'm just going to go ahead and pin on both sides just so I can have them in place when I get to the machine. Now this tab, it is optional. If you don't want it, don't apply it. But if you do, this is how you put it on. So just go ahead and baste it down on both sides. Okay, do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so next we're going to work on the patch pocket that goes on the front piece. Now, as you can see right here, I went ahead and this is the top. Well, let me turn it this way. So this is the top and the right side is facing. So I went ahead and turned under 1/4 inch. Okay, so turn under 1/4 inch on the top just so you can have a clean finish underneath the top of your pocket. And I went ahead and did a notch for my fold line. So I'm gonna turn right sides facing down right where that notch is, and I'm going ahead and pin on both sides. So it's going to look like this. Now remember to keep that 1/4 inch turned up, and then what we're going to do is you're going to stitch down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance down this way across the bottom, and then up the other side. So do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine, and I'm going to just clip a little bit at the top down to about a 1/4 inch away from that seam allowance, and then basically just that, and then do the other side. Okay, so as you can see, I kept the seam allowance around the rest of it, and then I'm just going to turn this around. You can use a point turner to get a nice corner at the top. Same thing on the other side. Okay, so now what we're going to do now, we're going to give this a good press, and then we also going to press that seam allowance, and we stitched all the way around just to get a pressing guide. So right where that stitching is at on the side, on the bottom, you flip that up, and then on the other side here, we're going to use that stitching as a guide and give it a good press. Okay, so we're back from the pressing station, and as you can see, I went ahead and folded our seam allowance all the way around, and then up here I have that 1/4 inch tucked under still. So this is the wrong side. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it to the right side, and I'm gonna show you how I'm going to pin this to stitch across the top. Now what I like to do is I like to pin on the front side, and just to check to make sure I'm catching the underside, and I'm going to pin that through. And I'm going to do that across the top. Now this is just to keep everything in place, so when I get to the machine I don't have to redo it. Okay, so I'm just going to turn it here, and I'm going to stitch across, making sure that I'm catching underneath. Okay, so go ahead and do that, come back, and then we'll attach it to our front piece. Now if you're doing 2 pockets, you want to do the exact same thing to the other pocket so you can apply it, but I'm only doing 1. And if you're not doing any pockets, you can just skip to the next step. Okay, so now that we're back from the machine and pressing station, we have our patch pocket ready. Because of my fabric is pretty sheer and it's hard to mark it, I went ahead and put pins indicating where I'm going to put my pocket. So I'm gonna go ahead and place that there, and then next I'm gonna go ahead and pin this to my shirt like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin on this side across the bottom, and then also on the other side. I have to take my time and go really slow because of the delicate fabric that I'm working with. It moves pretty easy, so when I'm pinning I just have to make sure that it's not moving too much, and I don't want to have a crooked pocket at the end. Okay, so once you have your patch pocket pinned all the way around, we're going to head to the machine, and we're just going to add stitch starting from one side, stitching across the side, across the bottom, and then up the other side, leaving the top open, obviously because that's their pocket. And then yeah, so you want to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. So let's head to the machine and stitch this down. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and stitched my patch pocket onto my left front piece. Now that we have that stitch there, I will say that you can go ahead and do a stay stitching, which means 5.0 stitch length across the neckline on both your front pieces, just so this won't expand or grow as we constructing. And then also on your back yokes right here. So this is one of my back yokes. You can stitch on opposite ends into the middle, just so this won't grow during the process. So this right here is my back piece, and right side is facing up because you can see the pleat and you can see my tab right here. So what we're gonna do now, we're going to grab one of our yoke pieces, and we're right sides facing. We're gonna place them onto each other. Okay, just like this. Now this right here is my yoke, and like I said, it's right sides facing. And then I'm going to grab my other yoke, and we're gonna place the other yoke underneath, and it's gonna sandwich the back piece. Now this right here is faced up, so it's gonna be right sides to wrong side of your back, and then they both just going to sandwich the back piece. Now this is the back piece, this is the yoke, this is the one everyone is gonna see, and this is the one that's gonna be on the inside. So once we have them all together, we're gonna go ahead and sandwich the back piece in between both of the yokes, and there should be a double notch on all three. And we're gonna pin there first, then we're gonna pin on the end. And then I'm just gonna finish pinning. And you wanna make sure that you have the ends all together. So now that we have all three pinned together, we're going to start on one side and stitch all the way across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Before we start stitching, I want you just to double check, making sure all three layers are even so you can get a good seam allowance all the way across, okay? So we want to backstitch at the beginning and also at the end. All right, so now you can go to the table and you can trim your seam allowance down to about 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so I'm back from the machine, and then like I said, I went ahead and trimmed down to about 3/8 of an inch on that allowance, seam allowance. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm going to lift this up, and as you can see, the right side is facing up. You see the pleat, you see the tab, and under here, you'll see the other yoke, which is face down. You want to keep that facing down and only lift up the one that you can see up. So this is the one that's on the inside, and this is the one that everyone is going to see. So in this same position, we're going to leave it like that, and we're going to grab our front pieces, and with the right sides facing, we're going to match them right up here at the shoulders, and then the other side. Okay, now if you want to, you can pin. I'm just gonna put a pin where that notch is, and then maybe one on the end here. Now these pins are just to hold them in place right now. So next what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna grab the very bottom of the back and also the bottom of the front piece, and I'm just going to roll them up just like this. Okay, we're gonna leave the yoke underneath laying flat and just continue rolling up this portion here. And then once we get it here to the middle, you're going to take the yoke on the bottom and we're going to bring it all the way up to meet with the yoke and also the front piece. And we're just basically going to sandwich the front piece in between both yokes. And I'm going to repin and then continue pinning across both shoulders. Okay, so now we're just going to head to the machine. We're going to stitch across both shoulders here and here using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So do that, come back, and we'll continue. All right, so I stitched down both shoulders and then I trimmed the seam allowance down to 3/8 of an inch. And next, only thing you have to do is just basically flip it all out like this. And then now you have, well, let me finish opening it up for you. So now we have the yoke and then the front with all the seams encased on the inside. Okay, so now the only thing you have to do is just give your seams a good press, and then we can move along to the front placket. Okay, now we're going to work on the front placket. As you can see right here, this is where our buttons and buttonholes are going to go on the front, the center front. So we have 2 fold lines. I went ahead and did notches on both ends where the fold line is. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to turn on that first fold line, give it a good press, and then we're going to fold it one more time like that, and we're going to press it all the way up. And then after we do that, we're going to turn it this way and pin it from the front, basically pinning it like this to catch the fold underneath. And then that's how we're going to get a good top stitch to close it out. But before we do all that, just a few details. Like I said, this first strip right here where that fold line is should be interfaced. I'm personally not going to interface mine because I have really delicate sheer kind of fabric, and I'll be able to see the interfacing through it. But if this was any other type of fabric, I would be interfacing just here, just so it could be sturdy. And because this shirt is going to be super casual, I don't mind it not having interfacing where I would typically have it at. So once again, we're just going to fold at that first fold line here. Give it a good press, and then we're going to do that second fold and press that as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and press mine, and then I'll demonstrate how to get a good pin, and then I'll show you how to sew it up. Okay, so I'm back from the pressing station, and this is the right side facing up. So if you look here, it's been double folded on that side. So basically what you want to do is you're going to pin from the front, catching that fold underneath. Okay, and you basically want to do that all the way up. And double check every time you pin, making sure that you're catching it, because when you get to the machine, you don't want to have to redo it. Okay, so I caught it all the way down. So now I'm going to head to the machine, and I'm going to make sure that I'm stitching right where that pin is all the way down to close out the underneath. Okay, so we're going to back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. And you should be able to feel where that fold is, so you know you're on the right track, and making sure that you're catching it. So you can go ahead and just check as you're sewing. As you can see, my stitch is right here, and that means I'm catching that fold. Okay, so I'm on the right track. All I have to do is continue that straight line. Back stitch at the end. Okay, so once we do both of our center fronts the same exact way, we're going to move along to our neckband and our collar. Okay, so first we're going to work on our collars real quick. then basically we're right sides facing. Just like this, right sides facing. And then we're going to pin along the side and across the top. You should not be pinning the parts down here that have the double notches, okay? So just grab your pins and then let's pin. And then once again, you might notice that I have both of my pieces without interfacing. You should be using an interfacing at least on one of your collar pieces, and that's just for stability. Okay, so now mine's pinned. So I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna stitch up across the top and then down the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. I'm gonna go ahead and trim my corners, and then I'm just gonna trim down the side and then the top down to about 3/8 of an inch. All right, now I'm gonna grab my point turner and turn this right side out. Poke them corners out. Okay, so head to your pressing table and give this a really good press. Usually I don't demonstrate how to press, but I will, just because I took a while to do this tutorial. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a little extra in here. So basically, this right here is an amazing tool to get your collars very sharp and precise. So you can see the point here. You can basically place that right there where that point is. And honestly, it doesn't matter if your seam allowance is to whatever side or open, because once you fold it in half, they're going to be in the same space. So you just go ahead and just press that like that. And then you can do the same thing for across the top. Just make sure that they're either on one side or either open. Okay. So now when you head to your table, your pressing station, you can just lay this down and it'll press really good. Okay. Now we're going to put together our collar and our neckband. But before we continue, I just want you to know that I went ahead and I top stitched about 1/4 inch away, all the way across the side, across the top, and then this side here. And the 2 notches are at the bottom, and that's where we're going to connect and place the collar onto our neckband. So once again, like I said, none of my pieces are interfaced, but yours should be interfaced. So because my collar is finished, the collar layer that's on top should be interfaced. So what you want to do is you want to turn it upside down like this. And then this right here is the neckband. So if I lift back here, this part right here should be interfaced, okay? And then this would be your non-interfaced collar band. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take it, we're going to put it right here in the center. And then we're going to take the non-interfaced neckband. And this one right here, I went ahead and I pressed up the seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch. And then I trimmed it down to 3/8 of an inch right here. So you can see that's pressed up. And then I'm just going to lay this on top, and we're sandwiching the collar on the inside. So now you want to take your pins, and we're going to pin all 3 layers together, and all 3 should have the double notch. So go ahead and find that double notch. Then we're going to pin. Okay, and then we're just going to continue pinning. Okay, so now just head to the machine. We're going to start on one end and we're going to stitch all the way until we get to the other end here using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. I went ahead and stitched from one end to the other end, and then I trimmed off the seam allowance down to about 3/8 of an inch, and I just did a little bit more around the curves. So now you want to turn it right side out. And then I use the curve part of my point turner just to get that curve out. Okay. So you should have one side that's a little shorter because we did turn in that seam allowance. All right, so now we're going to head to your pressing station. You want to give this a good press, and then we will attach it to our shirt. Okay, now that we gave our collar and our neckband a good press, we're going to go ahead and attach it to our shirt. Now you should have a notch here to the left and a notch here to the right, which is a total of 2 notches. That's located on the back yoke. And then we should have 2 notches on our neckband. So we're just basically going to line them up, and I'm going to pin there first. I just want to note that I am keeping this side right here free. So you can just open that up a little bit so you won't accidentally pin it. Match up the end. Okay, so now we're just going to head to the machine. We're going to start on one side, and again, we're going to stitch all the way across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we will continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine, and I went ahead and trimmed the seam allowance down to about 3/8 of an inch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this seam allowance here and encase it to form a complete neckband just like that. Okay, but first we have to over that seam allowance, and on the front side here I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin right in the center of that seam, and that should catch the folded edge underneath. Okay, and we're basically going to do that all the way across. So basically take that folded edge, place it just over that seam allowance, and then towards that right side we're going to pin in the center of that seam and then encase the other end. So let's go ahead and do that all the way across. Okay, now to have it all pinned, we're going to stitch from the right side, and we're going to head to the machine and we're going to stitch right in the ditch, which means right in between that seam, encasing the fold underneath all the way down. Okay, so we're going to back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. Okay, as you can see, we have our collar and our neckband placed on, and it looks amazing. So next what we're going to do is close out our side seam. Now, so we're going to turn our front and back right sides facing. So there should be a notch. You want to go ahead and pin there first. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and pin where we're going to stop at right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start the hem, we're gonna sew all the way up until we get right where that little curve is. That's where your armhole is gonna stop right there. So we're going to do that using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you wanna pin and sew your other side the same exact way. And once you do that, we're gonna come back and continue. Okay, now that we have the sides done, we're gonna go ahead and do some fancy seams. So we're gonna do flat felt seams. If you've never done flat felt seams, please try it. Follow along with me. It's not that hard. So basically what we're gonna do is I'm going to take the seam allowance and place it to the side, and we're going to trim down that back seam, not the one connected to the front, but the one that touches the back, that back seam. So open it up, and we're just going to focus on that back one, and we're going to trim it down to about 3/8 of an inch. Open it back up. So now, since that back seam is a little shorter, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of it, both seams, and press it to the back. And then after we press it towards the back, we're going to take that front seam and then fold it over that back seam, and then lay the entire seam towards the back, just like that. Okay, so go ahead and just press all of it to the side, and then we'll come back and continue. Okay, so I went ahead and turned it sideways, and the back is right here. So as you can see, I went ahead and pressed all of the seam allowance towards the back. So now, as you can see, this is the smaller one, and then this is the longer one. So we're basically just going to take the one in the front and just wrap it right over. Do it one more time. We're going to take it, we're going to wrap it over that one, and then we're going to lay it back flat again. Okay, so we're going to do it like that. Just tuck it over. I'm just going to tuck it over that back seam all the way up, and then once you do it all the way up, you want to give this another press. Okay, so give it a press, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so now that we have the tuck and then the press towards the back, we're going to go ahead and pin. Now I'm going to pin from the top, so I can top stitch it and have my top stitching on the top instead of the bobbing. But if you want to just keep it wrong side up like this, well, the inside up like this, you can edge stitch it all the way across, and it'll be just as good. You'll just have your bobbin on the top, but I want my bobbin on the bottom, so you can't see it on the inside. So when you pin, I'm just catching that fold. Okay, so I'm gonna pick a place, I'm gonna hold it, and then I'm going to pin, making sure that I'm catching the underneath right here. Okay, so I'm gonna do that all the way up. Once again, if you find it's a little too difficult to do, just edge stitch it. I mean, it's not that serious. Edge stitch it just so you can see where your stitching is going. Okay, so working on the top, I'm just going to stitch all the way up, making sure that I'm catching that fold underneath. Okay, so I'm going to feel for it. You want to make sure you feel for it. You should feel where you have that fold at. Then also when you put the needle down, you can look underneath to see if it's in there. Don't forget the back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. Okay, as you can see, we went ahead and stitched our flat fell seam and then gave it a good press on the inside. And now we're just going to put our facing onto our armhole. So, you know, this right here is going to be a raw edge, but I wanted to add a little bit of more weight onto that hem. So you want to grab one of your armhole facings. So your right side's facing, we're going to match them up at the end, and we're just going to stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You want to do the other one the same exact way. Okay, I'm back for the machine, and I went ahead and then pressed my seam open. And then next, you're just basically going to fold it in half, wrong sides facing, just like this. And then once you give it a good press, it's going to end up just like this, okay? It's folded in half. So next we're going to just grab one of our armholes, and that seam, I'm going to match it up with the seam of the armhole right there on that side seam. And then next I'm just going to start pinning. Okay, and I am placing this facing on the inside, just like this. Just place it on the inside, match it up with the raw edge, and pin. Okay, so you might have to just pull a little bit on that armhole to get it to fit, or you can just take more seam allowance before you fold it over to make it fit. All right, so now I'm just gonna head to the machine. I'm gonna stitch all the way around using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So do that, come back, and we'll continue. You wanna do the other side the same exact way. Okay, so I went ahead and added my facings to both of my armholes. And then for the hem, you can leave it raw if you want to, because we have the raw armhole, or you can do a double fold, which is you can turn up 5/8 of an inch and then take the end and then turn it to the inside, and then you can just stitch that down. That'll give you a clean double fold hem. And last but not least, you can do your buttonholes and also your button placements with your guide. So just put your guide here, make your markings, and obviously you have a view B and a view A depending on what length you did. And once you get done with all of that, you're all done. All right, congratulations, you're all done. Now I hope you enjoyed this course, and feel free to tag us on Instagram at Norris Dancer Forward and also at Mimi G Style so we can see all of your amazing makes. All right, see you in the next one.